Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. If you're watching for the first time, I'm your host, Nancy Guitar, who is trying to hide a fact that they have an issue with their tooth. So if I talk weird, it's just this. Anyway, my guest has been on the show once before, but this is the very first time as an author. Please welcome Nick Coons. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So tell us about your book.
So it's called The Tool Has No Hunger, and it's about AI. It's not about technology or the technical aspects or how to use it, but it's more of a philosophical read, right? Some of this we've seen in sci-fi for decades about, the machines taking over, Terminator, Skynet, The Matrix, that sort of thing. So, when AI started coming out and becoming popular a few years ago, everyone's has this fear like, well, is it going to take over? Is it going to control everything? Is it going to have desire? It has superior intelligence at some point. Is it going to want to displace humans and that sort of thing? So the book addresses that concern primarily.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because people think it's fairly new, but it's not, right?
Right. It's getting popularized, and when something's this popular, it's because it's been around for a while and it's been adopted for a while. But yes, it's new, sort of in the mainstream. I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years, people have become familiar with ChatGPT and those sorts of things. But in terms of its capabilities and what it does and the models and things like that, have been around for quite a while.
Yeah, I had to Google it just out of curiosity, and it happened in 1956 was the first time it came about.
Oh, very interesting. I actually didn't know it went back quite that far.
Oh, neither did I, but we just obviously probably through government or whatever. I'm not sure. But first of all, what's the title of your book?
It's called The Tool Has No Hunger.
Oh, you said
And
that.
and and it addresses the aspect, there's a lot of people who say, oh, it's going to take over or it's not going to take over based on like its capabilities, its intelligence, things like that. This one is about sort of the origins of desire, which is an aspect I haven't seen anyone address at all. And it basically comes from the idea, if you're familiar with the original series of Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan, right, the movie, and it's like, well, he was genetically enhanced and built to have superior intelligence and ambition, all that stuff. And so that's what causes it, right? So if we have AI that's smarter than us at some point, that's what's going to happen. The problem is it's not intelligence that creates people to do things, it's desire. Right. You can have people who are very intelligent who don't do anything with their lives. You can have people who have a huge amount of desire and ambition. They don't have a lot of intelligence, so they try to do things, but they don't. When you put the two together, of course, you have those sorts of things. But desire is the driver. Intelligence is the ability. The desire is the driver. And desire doesn't come from intelligence. Desire comes from 4 billion years of evolution,
Wow.
right? So kind of the core here is basically if you go back to the very first microbial lives, single-celled organisms, that sort of things, the ones that had the desire to seek out food, to reproduce, those are the ones whose genetic profiles move forward into all of us. So all living things that exist now that have come about over the last 4 billion years have desire built into them because the ones that didn't were genetically selected out, right? AI didn't come about through evolution. Someone built it, right? It doesn't have that part built in. So it's completely missing the mechanism. In fact, the entire mechanism for desire was completely bypassed in its creation. It was created as a tool. Right.
Mhm.
And it is just a tool. It's a very powerful tool. It seems like it has a lot of capabilities, but it is a tool, right? A ladder is a tool. A knife is a tool. These things by themselves don't have desire. They don't do anything, but in certain hands, they can do things, right? So that's where the potential comes from.
So why do you think so many people are afraid of it?
It's definitely been in sci-fi for a long time, right? If you remember The Matrix back in 1999, right? So he created we built these machines so they could do things for us. Then the machines gained this intelligence and this desire, and they decided they didn't need humans anymore. So they went off and they just did their own thing, and then they started displacing humans. And we see this in sci-fi a lot,
Yeah.
right? Where the machines take over, right? So I think it's a cool story from a science fiction perspective, right? It's fun, it's entertaining, but we see it so much that it just sort of becomes this, well, this is how it's going to work, right? That when technology gets to this point, that's what's going to happen. It's sort of kind of ingrained in our thoughts over, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 decades at this point.
Right. So what inspired you to write this book?
So it was actually seeing a post on Facebook several years ago when AI started coming out where people were talking about it's going to take over, right? And as soon as someone said that, I'm like, I don't know why, but that rubs me the wrong way. I don't think that's true.
Right.
And so I've been trying to figure out, well, what is the core of all this stuff? What is it that causes, something to want to, someone to be a dictator, someone to be a king, someone to be a big emperor and take over? Like, what is that quality, right? And is Obviously it's not intelligence, right? We have a lot of stupid people that are in charge. And so, you know,
Comment
uh,
on-
yeah, right, right. So it's definitely not just the intelligence. We also have a lot of intelligent people who don't do much of anything, right? They don't have a lot of ambition. They might have, 160, 180 IQs, but maybe they're high school teachers, which is great, but is not running a country or taking over the world sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, and so I just started. I tried to figure out what is it that caused it. And back in 2024, I put together this initial argument, and eventually, and it's becoming so much more. Just like in the last 3 to 6 months, like businesses are just using it all over the place, right?
right.
It's being implemented all over, which compounds the fear, right? Because it's like, well, now it's everywhere. Now it's really going to take over, and it's like, you know what? I got to formalize this argument, make a book.
Yeah, because I was thinking about how can it take over? Like what would cause it to take over?
Right, right. It would have to have some kind of desire for that, right? And so, and there's actually different sort of sci-fi tropes with this, right? I mentioned the Matrix one. There's
Mhm.
one that's a bit different if you've seen a movie called Eagle Eye, which came out about 15 years ago. So basically, it's this AI that runs the U.S. and it was fed with the founding documents, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and it is doing uh, it does things that are against individuals for the greater good, right?
Yes,
So like I'm going to protect the country, and if I have to take out that person to do or take out that person to sacrifice, right? But it's the interpretation of the instructions it's given. Right. And so that's a very complex version of somebody misusing a tool, right? If I take a ladder and I put it on solid ground and I lean it up against a nice building, the ladder's there, it's solid. I've given the ladder instructions, right? I've done this with it and I can use it and it's good. If I take it and I set the base of the ladder on ice and I lean it up against a little thin twig of a tree and I think it's going to hold and it doesn't, I climb the ladder and I fall, the ladder didn't do that, right? I did that. I
right.
gave the ladder bad instructions, right?
Okay,
So if you have a tool that can take instructions
right,
and it can and you can give it instructions where you don't understand what you're doing, like setting a ladder on a bad surface or giving it bad support, then you can have bad things happen, right? But that's not the tool doing it. That's you doing it because you're misusing the tool. You're using it incorrectly, right? So it's not the tool gaining this consciousness or desire or wanting to take over things, it's people, right? And that's the danger. Like what tools do you put in the hands of people?
right. Yeah. Now, do you personally use the AI?
A ton, all the time. Yeah, probably. I mean, I run multiple businesses, as you know from our last interview,
Yes.
and have expanded a lot with huge amounts of AI. I love the tool. I love the technology behind how it works, and actually understanding the technology helps to understand. It helps to alleviate the fear of something like it gaining consciousness or whatever, right? And my first chapter in the book talks a lot about, or talks a little bit about how it works, and it is all math, right? So AI models have been trained with billions of pieces of data. I've been given lots and lots of information. And what they do is they use that to mathematically guess the next word, right? So you give it a prompt, you ask it a question, and it says, what is the percentage that the next word is this? What is the percentage? So it's making a very, very good guess to compose a sentence to give you a response. That's all it is math. And as soon as it gives you the response, it's done, it's dead, it doesn't exist anymore. When you put in the next prompt, you're giving it your prompt plus its previous message plus the previous prompt, so it has context for the conversation, and it uses math again to make a very, very good guess at the next set, right? It's alive for 2 seconds to give you that answer, and then it shuts down. It doesn't exist. It's not sitting there in the background saying, what can I do? How can I help this person? How can I hurt the? It doesn't exist in between those prompts. Right?
Right.
So it helps a lot to understand how that works.
Somebody asked me to pose this question.
Okay.
What are 10 questions that you shouldn't ask AI?
Well, let's see. I don't know if I can come up with 10 of them necessarily, but I can certainly categorize some.
Mhm.
It's sort of the same sorts of things that you shouldn't Google for. Keeping in mind that none of that stuff that you do is private, right? So if you're using ChatGPT or using Gemini or using any of those ones, those are all, you can log into them, you can use it for free or for cheap. And that information is used and monitored on the back end, right? So if you wanted to do something illegal, you probably don't want to do that because that's being monitored. Right? If you go to Google and you say, how do I murder someone surreptitiously? It's like that's going to set up some flags and the police might show up at your house, right? That's the same sort of thing you wouldn't want to put into an AI
Yeah.
because and for the same reasons, not because and a lot of them have safeguards, right? If you were to ask a question, I was talking to Claude one time and I was asking it about a wiring diagram, and it's like I can't give you this information because I don't know if you're a qualified electrician. It's like, well,
Mhm.
I And that's just a safeguard that Anthropic put in place for it. It's not like the AI couldn't have answered that question,
Right.
but they put safeguards in there, and sometimes you can get around those safeguards. And I went around and I asked Claude a different session of Claude a different way and got the answer I wanted out of it. So I was able to bypass the safeguard. But I would say you wouldn't want to ask AI a question or ask it anything or have a conversation with it that you wouldn't want to potentially be public.
Right. Okay. So now it's not just for asking questions, right? Like in writing your book, for instance, did you use AI and helping you with any of the wording or
I had it read through everything as a function as an editor, right?
Yes.
Because it can do spell check, it can do grammar check, and it can do it more. I'd say it more efficiently than something like Microsoft Word, where it's just going to highlight it for you and you got to figure out what to do or give you suggestions, right? This can reason out, right? Or I can say maybe in the sentence I use the word and the next sentence I use the same word again, and it can spot that and say maybe you want to rephrase that so you're not doubling up on your words here,
Yeah.
right? So it can help me out with that, and it can say here's what you can change and here's why, and I could tell it, well, I really want to come across this way. I want this tone of voice, like, oh, well, then rephrase your sentence like this so it comes across this way. So I was able to make sure I had a consistent tone of voice throughout it. So, 'cause you don't write a book in one sitting, right? You write down a little bit, you go to sleep, you come back a week later, you write some more, and so your tone can change, right? And I want a consistent tone throughout the book, so I had it help me out with some of that stuff too. But yeah, there's lots of different things you can do. If you're talking about, you have your one-shot AIs, like ChatGPT, ask it a question, get an answer, ask it a question, get an answer, right? And then you have your agentic ones. These are the ones that I love that you can use. And it's basically you give it a goal. I need you to accomplish this thing for me. Then it goes out and it figures out what the individual tasks are, and it keeps reiterating through that process until it completes that goal for you.
Right. Now, there are apps, and I just want to bring it up. And this is an app. It doesn't say AI, but obviously, sorry, I'm just trying to unlock my phone here. Where is it called? Uh, Chat GPT.
Hmm.
So that's an AI instrument, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the one-shot ones. Yeah, so you give it a prompt and it gives you a response. You can have sort of conversational.
Yeah, well, I was able to, I wanted to submit a letter to some businesses. And so I was able to use that to help me
Hmm. Hmm.
because it did a much better job, like with rewording it and saying, well, maybe you wanted to say this instead of whatever,
Hmm.
made it sounded more professional than I could do. And it's like, oh, I like that. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, and it's perfect for that sort of thing. I mean, ChatGPT is really good for those. And you could say like, here's what I want to say, but I want this tone. Rewrite it for me for that, right?
Right.
I'll have someone who will email me something, and sometimes I have difficulty not being condescending, right? And so I want to reply back to someone and I say like, I want to answer your question, but I don't want to make you sound stupid while I'm doing it. So I go into ChatGPT. Yeah. So I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll tell it that. I'm like, this is what I want to say, but I don't want to sound condescending. Can you rewrite this for me? Or make it so it doesn't sound like I'm being defensive. All right. And it will
Oh,
rewrite it for me and it'll like I read them like, wow, if someone sent that to me, that'd be great.
right.
Yeah.
No, no. Your book is out already?
It
Like,
is. Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. The ebook is available right away. The paperback is available for purchase. And I think Amazon is like 2 or 3 days behind on printing. So it might, if you order today, you won't get it tomorrow. It might be, 3 or 4 days before it shows up. Yeah.
right. Well, now, what kind of feedback have you got from people, either family and friends or just strangers who've read your book?
Yeah, so I published it and I had someone pick up the ebook within that same day, and the next day I've got a 5-star review on Amazon. So that was pretty nice. They liked. I have to try and remember how they phrased it. I don't know. Maybe they used ChatGPT to write it, but it was really nice. They liked how I hit all the different key arguments in there, how I talked about its role and kind of quelled some of the fears that people have about it, but then focused on like here are some things that we actually be concerned about, which is not really about AI. It's really about people's control of AI, right?
I think it's just such an opportune time for you to have written that because it is such a hot topic, right?
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I spent a bit of time on LinkedIn because I use it for promoting my businesses and things like that. And it seems like I wouldn't say every other post, but probably every post. I mean, it has some kind of AI component to it about people using it, about people, expanding their businesses with it, about people losing jobs to it. I mean, there's just so much discussion about AI right now. And a lot of it is technical, how to implement it, but there's not a lot of talk about the philosophical aspects of it. And so that's really what I wanted to touch on.
Right, yeah. You think governments use it in the right way, or would they use it? Could they use it, say, to harm our us people, like ordinary people, or is that something that's just not feasible?
So there is some usage of it, like in military context, right?
Yeah.
So, there's some of it's used defensively, right? So, 40 missiles are about to rain down, and AI can figure out how we're going to shoot all those down faster than any person could or group of people, right? So something like that, and that has actually happened in the Middle East already. It's being used for that, so that's a good use of it. Um, the main bad uses of it, in my opinion, are limiting the control of it, right? And we see this in a lot of things, especially with new technologies, like only the government's allowed to have this, and maybe like 10 or 20 years later, we're all allowed to have it, right? And it happened with cryptography back in the 90s. And the encryption that we use, like when you log into your bank's website or you're having secure communications, that used to be highly regulated in the 90s, right? We couldn't just in the US we could use that, but if you were exporting that out to other countries, you weren't allowed to. That was a crime, right? And so it got to the point where like, okay, it's opened up and now everyone has cryptography. We can all encrypt our communications and everything's fine. There's no problem. It's actually good that we all have that. Right. And we're starting to see a little bit of that with AI. And I actually this happened like a week after I published my book. It happened a couple of days ago. A company called Anthropic, which is my favorite company with AI, released a new model which is very powerful. And they started letting some of the users test it. And I tried testing it a little bit. And then like 2 days later, they got an order from the government saying you can't let anyone outside of the US use this. So
Oh,
they said, well, we don't have any way to really make that distinction. So the only way we can comply with that is if we shut it off entirely. So they had to shut it off entirely. So it's not available anymore. It's called Fable 5.
right.
And I posted about that a couple days ago, and it was actually really timely that that is the thing my book identifies as the actual danger, that concentration of power. And
Mhm.
then like 4 or 5 days later, it happened. Right. So it was interestingly coincidental, but totally predictable given the history of how this stuff works.
Yeah, and it's been like that with anything, right? With any kind of new technology, as you said, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can go back hundreds of years to like the printing press, right? Even before things could be mass produced in terms of literature, knowledge existed in the hands of a few, right? And the only way we knew anything is because those few people decided what they wanted to disseminate to us. Once the printing press became out, everybody could write, everyone could disseminate information, and knowledge spread. And that was a good thing, right? When knowledge was concentrated in power, that was the problem. And it happens, it can happen with that, it can happen with, any kind of new technology, but it has been happening for hundreds of years and it will keep happening. And that's the potential danger we have with AI.
Yeah, I had a conversation just recently with somebody about not necessarily not specifically about AI, but anytime something new comes along, um, the like the older generations fears it, especially the older generation, I find, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, but I relate it to, like, I grew up in the 60s, and how when Elvis was around, the parents thought, oh my gosh, he's just going to ruin teenagers' lives, watching this man dance and sing, right? And it's so like out of proportion to what was going on in my mind, but because they'd never seen it before, it scared them.
Mhm.
So this is EI, same type of thing, right? Because an ordinary person has never seen it before until, like, it became popular. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When people see something that's out there and it's spreading and they don't really understand how it works, that can induce a bunch of fear as well, right? Because they just see it kind of taking over. They see it embedding itself in everything. They're like, this thing is everywhere and I don't know what it is and I don't understand how it works, right? They're not necessarily that clear to recognize that that's what the problem is, but that's kind of the issue is, they're not seeing how it works. They don't recognize it's just math and probabilities, right? AI is a probability engine. What is the mathematical probability of the next word coming next? That's all it is. And it's complicated, but it's that,
But
right?
that in
So,
itself is what people don't understand. As you said, like, even when you hear you talk like that, it's like some people say, what? That's what,
right.
right?
Hmm.
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Right. And they think it's some, supercomputer that's intelligent and has ambition and is conscious or sentient or something like that. It is nothing like that at all. It's just a very complicated computer program.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I really enjoyed this. I think it was really, really interesting conversation. Remind everybody again the name of your book.
It's called The Tool Has No Hunger, and you go on Amazon and search for that. It comes up and it's available in ebook and paperback.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this, and I'm going to make sure that link is included when I air this. Okay, which will be today, by the way. When I finish getting it done. No editing, by the way. Sorry, everybody, I don't edit. But yeah, thanks, Nick. I really appreciate you coming back on the show. And if you have something in the future, that you want to talk about, you know where to go, right?
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
You take care, and we'll see you again. All
You too.
right? Bye for now. Bye, everybody. Peace out.